Bring a Trailer podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Bring a Trailer podcast. Alex Porter here, operations director for the company, joined once again by my guy, Beck, who heads our white glove department. How are you, Beck?
I'm doing well, Alex. I was sent back down to the minors for a while, but here I am.
No, you're not in the minors here. Clinky. Beck, you drink beers on the pod with me, which is so great.
I do. Well, we both have, I think, the same evening ahead of us. So the best way to sort of blend from work to that is having a beer with Alex.
That's exactly right. So tell me about your time in the minors off the BAT pod. How was that?
A lot of listening. Been loving the model year episodes.
Oh, good. We got to get you in for one.
I would love to.
Have you had thoughts, feedback, idea? You want to criticize me right here into my face?
No, I like that it's competitive. I like that attribute to it. I would try to limit it to cars that have been on the site. I think that's fun to then bring that up.
It is.
But
do you like it when we drop a lot number and you can actually look at the thing?
Yeah, for sure. And then also, I think it also helps where if you were to follow the podcast on the website, you can see all of the links to things that are mentioned. So if you can actually see that reference there, That's kind of awesome. But yeah, otherwise it's been great.
We got to get you in on the next one. Where should we go? I've tried to do like kind of each decade. We've got one that's the 80s.
Yeah, 80s is a good one because you're getting into like ODB1, right? You're getting out of sort of the crucial time. You guys did 77, I want to say
77, which I thought would be bad.
Which was fantastic.
Easy. And then we did 84 and it was tough. It was our toughest year yet.
I think what it comes from is that the more challenging it is, the more interesting it comes out. Right. It's the same issue of like Top Gear versus Grand Tour. When they had limitations and it was challenging with budgets and all that, it was the most interesting.
Also, when they do crappy cars, it's my favorite. My favorite episode of Top Gear ever is the British Malaise era. Have you seen that one?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Where one of the tests is just park it on a hill and see if it can stay there when you put it in park. And none of them can.
I love the budget Alfa Romeo.
Oh, I don't know if I've seen that one.
Jeremy Clarkson gets a Alpha 75 Milano, which of course I'm privy to because I had
totally.
One. And I want to say James May gets
I bet it's a real reliable car too.
Yeah, he flips it. He flips it on the track, like goes sideways on a corner. Great in-car footage of him with his big head scraping against the inside. But like once they got to the Grand Tour, it was just too easy. Right, it was all the money. I think a part of it was that they were maybe just a little bit tired of doing that stuff.
I think so too.
The latest special is great. I would recommend it. It's on Amazon.
Wait, I thought they were done. They're still recording.
This is the last one. It just went live like last month, I want to say.
Interesting.
And totally well worth the watch.
They go on one of their big grand adventures.
They do a big drive. They go back to Africa.
Oh, great.
And the limitation on the cars is what's the car you've always wanted to pick, but it didn't apply to any of the categories.
That's great.
The only tough part for Randy might be that James May picks a Triumph Stag.
Oh, man, that's interesting. We won't mention that to him. We'll let him find out on his own. As I said up top, you run our white glove department, and it's been since you've been down in the playing AAA ball. We haven't had an update in a while. How are things in the white glove world?
It's good. It's been very interesting because 2023 was kind of such a weird correction year for a lot of the market. To see 2024 honestly feel much bigger than 2019, but more similar, kind of in its cyclical nature, if you will. Right now, we're in kind of the thick of the fall rush. A lot of our customers are people who submitted their car back in the summer, or maybe even sometimes early summer. And for whatever reason, life got in the way or just wasn't that pressing of an issue for them. And now they're starting to realize, oh, it is raining outside or it's snowing outside.
Let's get this done.
Yep. And so they're coming back in kind of full force. So that's always tough because I look at data for just sales data year over year on the month. And I'm always thinking November is going to be so quiet and slow. And I look at last year and it's like an insane month.
Correct.
We're still doing 900 cars a week on the site, which is...
October has actually often been our peak month. And that's because of we build up this, I think to your point, or what you're talking about, we build up this backlog of people over the summer and we're kind of working through it. That's a little bit different site-wide this year because we've made so many improvements in our production speed that it's looking like September is going to be our peak month. Like October was actually down a little bit compared to September because we don't have a backlog because we move things through so much more efficiently.
It was shocking how you told me a couple of weeks ago how fast the turnaround speed is now on Classic and Plus. Like for a long time, the question asked to White Glove was like, will this get me through faster?
Yep.
And I could usually tell people, yeah, it can. Yep. And it's kind of the same now. Like the big difference is people come in the door for White Glove, they don't have anything done.
Yep.
Right. And we need to facilitate everything for them often. And so
you're on your own.
There's no
timeline
way,
kind of.
There's no way we can turn something around in 2 days. We can't shoot a car and get all your docs done. And I don't know if that's part of it is obviously in-house. There's been a massive amount of improvement.
Correct.
But also, I wonder how much more sellers are pre-preparing themselves a little bit. Definitely repeat sellers, obviously, out of experience.
I mean, it's interesting. Do people ask you those questions as much anymore? It just doesn't seem to be a complaint in the way that it was before.
I get a lot of questions.
I think there might still be a perception out there that we're slow and we're not anymore. Definitely, like not at all, and haven't been for a while.
Well, it's because they read a blog post from 2 years ago.
Totally.
Or their buddy told them that, and it's because their buddy sold their car on the site 2 years ago. Then sometimes they've got friends or they've spoken to a BET partner or a power seller who they've mentioned to them, I can get your car through in X number of days. And that might be true, but they're also not accounting for all of the prep work, like shooting the car, getting the car clean, going forward. If you go backwards in time, when do you really call when the process starts?
Well, that's what's so complicated about it. I mean, if you come in fully prepared, you're a repeat seller, or you're just a dialed private party person, you've got all your picks, all your docs, you're ready to go. You did a nice thorough submission with all the info we need. You can have your car live in a day, 2 days, like no problem.
Which is amazing because that was not always the case.
But the thing is, like, that's a lot of people don't come in the door that way, right? And that's actually totally fair. But in order for us to prepare a good listing, you know this better than anyone, it actually takes a lot of time and effort. And so if we're perfectly happy to help guide people through that, but if you don't have your title and you don't have enough pictures and you actually don't really know what to say about your car, like it's going to take longer just because we've got to ask you questions and you've got to respond, and maybe you have to dig up documents. And the biggest pain point is always like, if you have to go take a full compelling gallery and videos, like that's going to take time.
I also feel for the sellers who they come to us after having to try and sell it for a while, right? They've been doing weeks and weeks, classified ads,
they're like,
whatever.
Get it out of here.
And so by the time they cut to us, they sort of think that at this point, all right, great, now just convert it into a 7-day auction. And that's obviously...
Sometimes they've even had failures on competitor, like bring a trailer copycat sites, and they're... I feel for those people, I really do. I mean, I have a hard time selling cars, as I think you have in the past too. It's just like, it's hard to find the time. It's really one of the reasons we have your department, right?
Vinny and I actually both have kind of a rule that we're going forward only ever going to buy cars we could sell on Bring a Trailer, because we would only want a situation where after 7 days you have a buyer.
Yeah.
Right. Like whether that buyer is at the level that you were hoping for or not, that is a real person. Right. As opposed to the ridiculousness that is fielding Craigslist ad responses and all that. It's too much.
I haven't done it in a really long time. It's one of the reasons we built the company, is to do away with that, some of that kind of stuff. I'm so strapped for time with kids and everything. I'm seriously considering selling one of my cars with a local partner.
You've been saying that.
Yeah. I think I might do it, because like that's one of the attractions. Drop your key, drop your title, delete it from your brain. And
it's the reason why the industry is still thriving.
And so many of those people are so good at doing it, and they have such a great reputation. It's almost kind of like a no-brainer, especially if you're, like, to your point, committed to selling the car, kind of no matter what, right? No reserve, local partner, get it out of my life.
I know. And that's that local partner. I saw we added some sort of tags to like user accounts. That's obviously really helpful, because I think people just want kind of the referral.
Totally.
Back in my photography days, referral was the gold standard, because a lot of the times you're not always looking for, you don't want to go through a vetting process. You don't want to be HR, like interviewing all these different things. You just want someone to tell you, is this the right person for me to use? Great, done. I'm there. And that's really nice to have.
The older I get, the more I just use. I'm like, who's your guy on that? Who does your roof? Who does your electrical?
That's why advertising like doesn't work on older people. You know about this, right? You're either so brand loyal that you're only going to do the same thing over and over again, or you don't listen to strangers. You only listen to friends who you trust.
Absolutely. And then friendships end when you get a bad referral.
Exactly.
What are some white glove kind of success stories, or particularly interesting results, or even just interesting cars that you guys have listed recently?
Sure. I can't speak without starting off with the 500K.
Oh, totally. Tell that story. That's such a compelling one.
We had a
fair amount of press coverage too. People were writing about it, and there was a lot of buzz about this car.
Got all over the place, which was great. I mean, it was kind of a keystone moment, I think, for Bring a Trailer, for White Glove Service. It's for those who don't know,
is it our biggest pre-war sale ever? Oh no, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum car is probably the only one that's higher. The 770 Mercedes.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think.
This was a 34 Mercedes-Benz 500K, which was originally a Cabrio B. It was later lost its body.
It's rebodied twice, wasn't it?
Rebodied twice, but it lost its body in World War II, was found basically as a chassis and an engine, was then rebodied, and then someone wanted to honestly make a speedster look for it, which is probably the best look that the...
Absolutely. The iconic 500, yeah, totally. Yeah.
And so that got put on, and the owner had it for quite some time. He'd had it for a good 12, 13 years.
And this seller was the one who went through all that stuff, right? Yeah, he was the guy who essentially fully restored the car and had this new body built.
Made it to what it is today. And so he had, a lot of personal identity associated with this, which can sometimes be trying, sometimes be difficult, right? Because you're trying to shape people into the Bring a Trailer style.
It was an obsessive amount of work that he put into this car.
And that's a tough thing to disassociate from to a certain degree, because at the end of the day, the bidders, they are buying the seller to a certain degree, but you've also got to be able to bring some objectiveness to that presentation so that people don't feel like you're pushing on the scales in one way or another. And so that's a big conversation. That's what Roland and I do every single day. Roland's the other auction specialist within White Glove, and we spend all day basically just talking sellers through how do they tap into the BAT marketplace while not having to worry about their identity and their ego and all of those things, while still getting them hopefully the best possible result.
Right.
So this was an amazing one, I think, for us to have, because it required some levels of expertise that we don't often get to tap into.
You mean from the seller himself?
From the seller, but also from our staff. I mean, Cecily and Ryan were kind of instrumental in this making it through. I don't write these listings. I don't have nearly the inventory of knowledge that those two have. And that's kind of crucial to have those kind of people behind us.
Huge shout out to Cecily, who writes almost every one of these. She's one of the best we've ever had. Actually, is the best we've ever had, really, in some ways, and goes so deep on these crazy, especially pre-war cars and significant cars with significant history. But it's unlike anything I've ever seen. The kind of way she puts these things together in an objective fashion. She's a former newspaper person.
I was going to say, I remember she was a copy editor, right?
That's correct.
I remember the day you interviewed her.
Really?
I had just started working at BAT. It was like a few months before. I was in the old office. And you came out of the downstairs and you were on fire.
Oh,
and you were like, I just interviewed this lady, Cecily. she had taken a break from welding on her 123 Mercedes.
124, I think she was working on then. Yeah.
She was working on something, and it just had all of the bullet points of just someone who fit the mold really well. And so for a while we were both just general auction specialists, and then we eventually sort of moved our own ways and in different teams. And so she's a premium auction specialist. She writes some of the most heavy hitting stuff on the site. And so having people like that is what gives us the legitimacy to do more and more of these, because this is the kind of thing that we would have heard over and over again. One of those won't ever be on BAT.
Totally.
Right. That won't happen there.
Yep.
That can't do an internet auction. That has to be.
These are the subtext there is these are hard cars to sell, no matter where you're doing it. Right. There's a limited audience for this.
And there's not only a limited audience, but that the audience needs to be babied and satiated in a way. Someone needs to be handing them champagne or whatever. And sure, there probably are some people out there, and obviously they're able to do that because those auction houses are to a certain extent still functioning. But if you want to bring that place to Bring a Trailer, there's still a requirement of having people like that who understand the layers of these cars. It's just an insane amount of it. So this was a very strong learning experience. It was a wonderful time working with them, working with the seller on this one. It did very well.
Give me some stats on, it was one of the most popular auctions we had this year. Huge number of comments, as I recall, huge number of bids. Went way beyond where I thought it was going to go.
Went way beyond, I think, to be honest, I don't think anyone knew where it was going to go.
Yeah,
because this is a
hard car to put it. Yeah,
hard part. Yeah. Another part of my day is just reserve negotiations.
Right.
And when you've got what I would call a high variable offering, is very difficult to find comps and then sort of guess it in there. So at the end of the day, it really just comes down to what the seller wants for it. So it did $2,012,000, which was significant. We were very happy with that. But yes, the numbers on this one, it was only 3,700 watchers, which is high.
That's high.
Your average BAT listing nowadays is around 1,000 watchers after 7 days. But when you hear that it was 87, almost 88,000 views, that's extremely high, right? Your normal BAT auctions anywhere from 10 to 15,000. So much higher increase in that. And then lastly, the most important one as far as shockingness is 1,270 comments.
Yeah. One of the top of all time.
And it was 900 comments. I kid you not, in like the last hour and a half.
Yes. Well, because the bid extensions went really long, right?
It went over an hour and a half.
Yeah, amazing.
So it just kept going. It got kind of loopy. Like it was almost like the community
with multiple players. It wasn't just two people. There were a bunch of players in there.
And people went away and then they came back 30 minutes later to bid again. I don't recall it ever really getting into the checking for last bids. It never got scary with 1 or 2 seconds. Smart people.
There were a lot of people who wanted it.
If you're listening to this and you're bidding on Bring a Trailer, don't wait. Don't wait.
If it's one of our power sellers offering the car, they're going to remind you about that.
Yes, they will definitely remind you.
Yeah, it's not eBay. You don't have to snipe at the last second. There's no sniping on BAT.
Yeah.
Well, that was an amazing one. That was an amazing car. Just I love pre-war cars, as you know. So that was I was just happy that we were listing it. So I mean, 10,000 extra bonus points for the fact that it did so well and was such that the community loved that auction so much. What are some other biggies?
All right. So here's a weird one.
Okay.
You might not be that thrilled by it, but I find it very weird.
Oh man, I'm excited.
It was a pair of VIN-matched Demons.
Oh no, people were talking about this a lot.
This also got a ton of traction.
Yeah.
So it was basically the first and the last. So a 2018, first generation of the SRT Demon. And then
which is only like 800 horsepower or something, right? What were the early ones? Some crazy number. Yeah. Okay.
And then a VIN-matched. So the last, I'm making this up, 9 digits of the VIN. There's only like 1 digit, I think, really in the entire line that actually is whatever the model year one is. Doesn't match. But
it's different. Yeah.
But it's for all intents and purposes, is considered VIN-matched. Last one, the Demon 170 from 2023. What I learned in this process, I didn't realize this. You could actually order your Demon 170 to be matched to your 2018
if you were a previous customer. If you had one. Right, yeah, okay.
I don't know if you had to be a customer or not.
Okay.
You just had to show them what your VIN
was. Did this seller do that, or did he find them separately?
A dealer who bought it from somebody.
Okay.
Somebody who had it as a pair. And we've actually gotten pitched this before.
Not the same exact cars, but the same scenario.
Set.
Yeah, okay.
Different set. Actually, I've had probably 3 or 4 pitches.
Interesting.
And the reason why this one worked was the guy was willing to do no reserve.
Yep.
No one's willing to really do that on it. It's a big risk, as you can imagine. But interestingly, when talking to Howard, head of auctions, about this, one of the things we came down to was, not to sound kind of like a downer, but if you list 2 cars in one auction, you're cutting your revenue in half, right? A lot of sellers wonder, why can't I have these 2 cars are so similar? I've got a new Corvette and an old Corvette. Just put them together. People will like that. I mean, there's a whole argument we've discussed of your
We've done it a few times, but we try not to do it because it's almost always going to lead to disappointment for the seller, right? Like just list them together and be like they're the, separately, but at the same time, which we've done too. But this is slightly different, I would say.
This is slightly different. It's very rare that 2 vehicles really actually benefit each other to be paired in the actual auction.
Correct.
It's like so incredibly, really, really rare.
Yeah.
And so with these 2, it was a bit of an experiment. Hadn't done it before, but at least not within white glove. Sold for $265, which I think was actually probably what they would have sold for individually.
Yes,
I don't think it's an extreme difference there. I think what helps is that these are, as the opposite of the Mercedes, these are low variable offerings, meaning they've got almost no miles, Carfax,
they're
window
both black,
sticker.
As I recall, weren't they?
What's that?
They're both black.
Both black, yeah. Pretty much matched in as many ways as you could possibly do it. But it meant, though, that if you were to buy them prospectively, you also knew that if you needed to sell them separately, you could kind of figure out what that asset number is pretty easily, right? You can just look at the BAT model page, find it. For all these late model, low variable cars, has like the prettiest plotter graph on the model pages. I love seeing those because like it's just a fine line of data points in whatever direction they go in, right? The older and the more complicated the offering gets, it just becomes more and more scattershot.
Yep.
And so it's nice with these ones. I think it's a little bit straightforward to do that on. If you try to do VIN-matched to older cars, it gets real shaky at that point.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
I think we did do it one time with Corvettes.
Yes.
Like an old, maybe a C1 and a C.
I want to say it was a C1 and a C7 maybe.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
And they were both some kind of spec that was similar, and they definitely had matching.
They had matching last 5 digits.
Correct. And they were the same color and everything. Yeah. Somebody had gone to an incredible
length.
Did
not make money on that.
No way. Well, back to the Mercedes thing, talk about your labor of love. It's the same thing. One of my favorite things on that Mercedes, I just want to say real quick, is there was the seller was extremely knowledgeable in the comments. And one of the things somebody said, because he won a bunch of awards for that car, and they said, are you going to give those with the car? And he goes, I consider those my reward for all the work I've done. And there was so much subtext there.
I've had that discussion with many sellers because a lot of the cars that come through White Glove are award winning in some capacity.
Usually people do give the awards.
Usually people do. But if they're often they want to have the photographs with the trophies with the car in the auction. But then if we do that, we have to specify in the auction test that the trophies are not included in the sale because we don't want people to see those photos and assume
they're there. Yeah.
And one time when I found out from a seller that they were not included, he had a great response of the buyer will get to earn their own.
That's totally. They can put in the effort that
their opportunity going forward.
I love that. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump back to the Mercedes. Any other notable ones that you want to mention?
One that didn't sell, but I got to bring it up because I love it. We had a Carrera GS Coupe 356.
Oh yeah, totally.
It was close. It was a very pretty car. It had won its own awards as well. It did sell after the auction.
Oh, good.
He and the high bidder made a deal.
Great.
That they were both happy with. So
that makes us happy.
And he was very happy, which is nice because he's the kind of person that he was wonderful to work with and would love to have him come back. He did have probably a happier story as far as sales is concerned. He also had one of the best, if not the best, Fiat 600 Jolly on the site.
Did he list it also?
He listed as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We produced them at the same time. Cars were shot, I think, the same day, but we ran them about 2 to 3 weeks apart to give them some breathing room. And that Jolly, it was cute. I mean,
oh man, great pictures.
Pictures. This is Jordan Cole is the photographer. Username Trust in the Machine. Highly recommend following him on Instagram if you can. He's one of our best. He works out of Texas. He's the kind of guy where if we have a repeat seller or a seller who really knows the collection world in Texas, when we've connected him with Jordan Cole, they're like, oh, I've seen that name.
Oh, interesting.
So they know of him. Yeah.
I'm just staring at this Carrera. I looked at it when it was live, but I'm pouring it over it again. Yep. School me on GS means some aluminum body panels. What's the differentiation between a GS? There's a GL and a GT.
There's a GT, GS. Is a GL just the Lux one?
Oh, see, I've asked the wrong person.
You're
supposed to be able to answer all this. Anyway, beautiful car, Furman motor. That's what I care about. It was not a matching replacement, motor, which is the case with a lot of these.
Correct. Yeah, for the most part, right? The horror stories of people dropping these out.
I've talked on this podcast with at least 2 different guests about reuniting either 550s or Carrera 356s with matching numbers Furmans because they almost all got separated.
Yeah, exactly. But these ones, non-matching replacement motor, I don't think it affects it to an enormous amount as long as it's the desirable version of it. But this means you could actually really drive it and not worry about it as much. But This one wasn't award-winning. It was sort of an oddball in that way. It was a pristine and very perfect, but not matching.
I recently found out one of the things I'd always heard about Furmans is they've got the roller bearing roller bearing mains on the crankshaft. The crankshaft bearings are roller and makes them hard to drive and rebuild, and you have to be careful with how you rev them and all this stuff. But then maybe it was with Cam Ingram. Somebody I was talking to said the Carrera 2, which is a 2-liter, a bigger Furman in it, those have plain bearings in them at the end. And so it's a kind of a simplified, improved motor. And those are the ones I like the most anyway. I know they're not an A. It's not as pretty. It's a C body style, but that also means disc brakes and stuff.
Would your ideal situation be a Carrera 2 motor and an A? Yeah.
No, I think a full Carrera 2 maybe. Even though I do like A's better on balance. Were you at the Lufka Cult where there was a green Carrera 2? It was kind of like a not quite Irish green, but it was like a slightly lighter, beautiful
This
car.
was at the Port of LA.
All I can picture is the car. I know it had a roof rack on it. It's a beautiful car.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's probably my dream. Mm-hmm. That's probably my dream. 356 is in general an A is hard to deny.
It is. I remember being very early into BAT talking to Randy about why A's and pre-A's are
Randy's
on the pedestal.
A only.
And it was A only. And I asked him one time, well, why just A's? And he pointed to the picture of the silver A that he used to have. He goes, that's why.
Yeah, totally. He's like full partisan, like only one way. I actually like B's even. I like them all, but the early B T5B with a small rear window and one grille is an interesting car too, in the middle.
I like B's because I also like Roadsters.
Yeah, totally.
I think Roadsters are the best blend. I can't do a Speedster. I sat in the old Speedster that was
Convertible D. I thought you were like a Convertible D.
Convertible D is good as well. It's an issue of windscreen.
Oh, totally.
It doesn't work for me.
I drove that Emery Outlaw car that Randy and Gentry, the co-founders of the company, had. And in the morning time, driving down an empty freeway where you weren't slowing down was great. And then in LA traffic in the sun in the afternoon, I was like, this is like a hard no.
Your eyes
as beautiful
are
as they are,
below the belt trim of every car.
Totally, everyone's staring at you. You're just out in the open. There's no protection. You're just sweating. I mean, yeah. Any other notable ones or anything coming up? Anything you want to tease that's coming up?
Coming up. Let me see really quick. Yes, I've got our good friend gblue, Greg Blue, out of Hawaii. Has a
sick driving videos with flip flops on. It's like he is like a life inspiration for me.
One of the photos that he's shared with me is him standing on top of his 356 Carrera, which he's brought to multiple alumni events. Well, he's on some rally.
That's the unrestored one, right?
Okay. And he's standing on the hood of the car barefoot with his arms up in the air.
Perfect.
So he's living the life. He is bringing a Mazda RX-7 Evo Group B race car.
This is like a big flared out,
big wing.
It's an FB or an FC? What year did you say?
FB, I believe, 85.
Yeah. Okay.
And so,
like my old race car, except an actual good one.
Correct, an actual race car.
They got crazy with huge flares and kind of like ducktail spoilers and stuff.
This thing looks pretty insane.
It's IMSA. What did it race in?
Group B. Was the intent.
I didn't know that they ran those in group, or it didn't actually run in it. It was built for it and didn't make it.
87, 88 would mean that it didn't happen, right? Because 86 was the cutoff year. That's why the 959 didn't get to do it, but it's an 86 car.
Yeah.
So this one, it's a wild looking thing.
I bet.
That's in production now. That'll be coming up soon.
I've heard a few things from Roland that I don't want to give away that I'm excited about. So I'm not gonna tease too much, but I know you guys have good stuff coming up. We got to clear it out before the snows come for all these people.
We get a bit of tunnel vision in White Glove, where we're so focused just sort of on our production and our throughput that we don't really see larger picture what's happening. So it will sometimes shock me that I'll see something live on the site, like the Ford GT that's on the live site right now, the Gen 2. I was like, I didn't know there was a studio collection version. Mm-hmm. And I look at it, it's Roland's car.
Yeah.
Like, how did I not realize that Roland?
Right, you get tunnel vision. I think everyone in the company does to a certain extent, right? Especially when we're busy. And typically this point of the year, to your earlier comment, we're usually kind of cooling off, right? In November, and we're still kind of charging ahead right now. It's not quite as wild as it was 2 months ago, but I mean, 900 cars a week is still a freaking tremendous amount. And
it's still a churn. And with it probably helps right now also is that we're not yet approaching the big vacation time people are doing. So
one of the big things that happens is like we have a very different take on seasonality than most people do. And I'm speaking for us both here together to the audience, Beck, but we find that results are great during the supposed months when you're not supposed to sell a car. I understand that folks were privileged to be out here in California where the driving season is 365 days a year, but we find results are just as good, but a lot of people don't buy into that. Submissions slow down and seller approvals slow down. Plus everyone has the holidays and they kind of slow down on the work they want to put into selling cars. So, which is totally natural and makes sense. And it's a great little breather for our staff too. But we are approaching those times.
Inventory goes down, but the same number of people are looking at the site every day.
Absolutely. So exactly true.
Black Friday
Black Friday tends to be a monster day for us. We usually don't end auctions on Thanksgiving. And so Friday is usually a huge number of cars. And as we all know, people want to do commerce on Black Friday in America.
You're at a party looking at your phone. You're ready to buy yourself a present.
Totally. Maybe a few beers in. Cool, dude. Well, thanks for that update. I thought if you're down for it, I didn't prep you with any of these, so this is like totally cold.
But I've got BAT open on my laptop, and I'm very good at search.
Okay, great. I thought we could do, and I have had time to think about these, so I can vamp for you if needed. I thought we could do a few of the questions of the week. Our question of the week team, shout out to Ben and to Fernie, have been doing some really interesting ones recently. So I thought I'd hit you with a few of these, and we can just kind of BS our way through some car talk. Sound okay?
Go for it.
Okay. I think I'll start out with something kind of basic because this one's going to be easy and maybe a little boring because you and I have very similar taste on this. Favorite all-time sports sedan? I think I almost guarantee know what you're going to say. Give me your quick gut.
Okay, so right off the bat, I saw this. I read this one.
Okay.
And I saw the comments where the 2002 got shot down because not a four-door.
Not a four-door.
And I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. Then again, also
feel free to throw NK in there, buddy. Is that number one for you?
Could do an 1800 Tissa. TISA would be a great one. I'm also a current E46 ZHP owner.
Yes.
Which is a great one. But I think I have to go with, Lotus Carlton is something that I would love to try at some point.
Okay.
I've started to get like kind of fantasy.
You're going to advocate for that for greatest of all time?
I mean, it's a bit of a supercar performance in that thing. I can't do a Kazi Sapphire because you lose the wing.
Yeah.
And I feel like
the wing is key on all those cars.
The wing is extremely important. So then I would then result down to E34 M5.
Oh, that's kind of where I was going to. I thought you were going to come to a screeching halt at 500E W124. I thought for sure. Interesting.
I've gone a little bit more soft on those as I've experienced. I owned a W124 for a while, and I know that it's not the same. I had a 300E 5-speed.
It's remarkably similar. But I mean, the motor is incredible in the 500E, but the car is not that different.
Right. I feel like the E34 drivetrain is just something that I would love to experience more of, especially obviously the 3.8 would be ideal. That would be one that I would love to probably own as a forever car.
And those came in a 6-speed too, which did we get that here? Is it only 5 speeds in the US or were there 6 speeds here?
I'm not sure, but definitely those are by far the least common.
I know there were 6 speeds in the 540 E34, which is a rare thing, but we used to work on one. I would drive it a lot. That's my favorite M5 styling wise. That's my top.
Which is growing me. That's one of those things where there's a lot of cars. Be an interesting poll. We should poll BAT staffers when they start here on how they feel about certain things. And then after 3 years, how do they feel? After 5 years, how do you feel?
Are you with me that the E39 M5 was one of your favorites and now you're like a little tired of it?
It's come a little bit cooler. I think it's part of it. You get a little bit jaded because everyone talks about them so much.
Totally.
But like a big one would be, British Roadsters. How do you feel about them when you come in the door versus after a few years? There's going to be a bit of a discrepancy there.
Totally. 500E would be up there for me. See, it's interesting the way our team framed it. They framed it as your favorite, which is very different than a conversation around what's the greatest, right? Yeah. What's the greatest of all time? Then you'd have to talk about like 6.9 Mercedes probably, or even the 6.3 maybe, or even the Grosser.
I was going to say the Grosser is one. But that's the thing of when you're talking about favorite.
I think E39 M5, a lot of people would put up there as one of the greatest.
You probably wouldn't call a Grosser a sports sedan. Maybe a 6.9, but not.
Yeah, probably not. What about the short wheelbases? I mean, that was crazy to be able to go 150 miles an hour in a sedan in the 60s. I mean, that's wild.
Sold the 600, the Mercedes 600 of the widow of the Johnson & Johnson family.
Oh, of course. Those were the kind of people that had it. I think we had Elvis's too, didn't we?
I think we did.
Or maybe Roy Orbison's, maybe both.
Had a custom pinstripe around the car with her initials written on the rear passenger door that she would enter on.
That's one of those cars where almost every one probably has significant ownership history because you would never have bought one if you weren't rich or a despot or something.
But then it gets also controversial because
what's the blood quotient of this car?
You don't want to look into what that person.
How many citizens of their own country did the person who bought this car kill? Yeah.
How many chemicals have been taken out of the ground and put into people from their best efforts?
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's so many great sports sedans. I mean, we didn't even talk about some of the cool American ones. I mean, there's like, it's such a broad category. It's hard. Maybe that's why our team framed it as favorite. And you and I immediately go to German stuff, right?
Because you could add, true. But you could also ask that question 5 different ways and get different answers.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people would probably talk about some of the Lexuses. I don't know. Maybe those don't count. Maybe an LS is not sporty enough.
Personally.
GS though, people love those. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's all kinds of interesting stuff. Okay, that one was a little basic. How about, let's get a little bit weirder here. How about what car has the coolest scoops of all time?
Oh, do you want to hear a horror story first?
Yeah, sure.
Oh,
always.
God, I can't believe I'm admitting this. I put a scoop.
The podcast brings out the truth.
I put a hood scoop on my Alfa Romeo Milano in high school.
Wait, what?
So I saw
like popping up hood scoop?
Yeah, like a popping up hood scoop on it. Part of it was a little bit of a, this is probably right after Fast and Furious comes out. But more importantly, when in your teen years, when the internet's starting to come out, if you got interested in a particular car, you just deep dive into learning 100%. As much about it as possible.
Yes.
And I found a picture of the Evolution, the Evo version of that car when it was very briefly used for touring car racing. They moved to the 155.
Those are the like crazy kind of box flared ones with
super flary and scoops and
they were touring spoilers. Cars or they were DTM.
It's a good question. I actually don't know what I saw this photo a long time ago. I printed it out on
white, half white and half red livery, right?
This one was all red.
Okay.
I had the red with the white Alfa Romeo emblem sort of over the hood. And I wanted that so bad. And I thought that I could build this thing into it. And I was so technically challenged that I got to a hood scoop and I was done. I died.
But like those kinds of teenage mistakes are how you learn how to have car taste. Like I did all kinds of terrible stuff.
Right.
Like,
what is the worst thing you've ever done to a car?
I mean, every I had my Ghia, my Porsche. My Porsche downstairs, the 912, still has this terrible like Clarion CD player, that I put in, and big speakers that you pinned all over the inside of the car, cutting through the original upholstery. I mean, terrible.
The worst, that's my most embarrassing.
I wanted to put
to a car.
I'll admit something embarrassing. I wanted to put, because you wanted bigger wheels. So in high school, that car had deep six Fuchs on it, which were later stolen, but like classic, right? And I wanted to put the biggest wheels I could get on it. So I wanted to put like Boxster twist. I never did this, thank God, but I was like trying to find them, like the twist Boxster wheels.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, right. How horrible would that be? If you saw that on VAT now, you'd be like, that person needs to be arrested and put in jail.
Shoot the car.
Totally.
Just shoot it.
Totally. Yes. Right. I mean, burn it to the ground, or at least the wheels. Nobody would have stolen them, maybe.
So you said scoop. Best scoop. Okay. I'm going to give you a weird one that I hadn't, you probably wouldn't think I would say. I love is it the Continental 56 and 57? 56 has a rear intake scoop behind the driver passenger door to go to the air conditioning.
Wait, I don't even know if I know this. This is when it's Continental branded.
When it's a Continental, when it's a two-door, do 19, or is it 65, 67?
It's when it's not a Lincoln, right? When it's just a Continental.
Correct.
Oh, yeah, the Mark II?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's
I don't know if I love these cars, and I don't know if I've ever noticed this scoop.
Okay, do you see it?
Right here, behind the quarter window?
Are you on a 56 or 57?
I'm on a 56. Do I need a 57?
No, it should be on the earlier year. Maybe it's on the
Where exactly is it?
It's just behind the door. It's a tiny little air intake. And it's the fact that these things had air intakes on the sides of these cars. It must be the 57 then. And they got rid of them afterward. I find to be such a weird little quirky thing. You think it's like for some, rear engine kind of car, but it's not. It's actually for the air conditioning.
Oh, I think I do see it. So if this is 57, is it on one side only?
It might be on only one side.
Okay, let's see.
Should be on driver's side, maybe?
It doesn't look like it's on the driver's side. I think it's on the passenger side. Well, I believe you. We're definitely not cutting this part out if you're wrong. Whether it is asymmetrical or not, that's actually a good segue into my favorite, which is weird and is also on an American car. And also goes back to my youth and kind of similar to your Alpha story, something that I was obsessed with because I saw one on a kind of broken down on the side of a house. And that is the asymmetrical hood scoop on an SVO Mustang.
Sure.
They're offset for that top mount intercooler. I've always been obsessed with it. And like hard pressed, that's probably my favorite scoop on a car ever. I later had as I've told you many times, a 87 Turbo Coupe, which had the twin kind of almost NACA duct looking snouts, but those are kind of right down the center line. Same engine as an SVO Mustang, but the offset one for the Mustang I love.
Similar to 924 Turbo. but also the 94 Carrera GTS.
Correct. And those are NACA, I think. Those are NACA ducts. I'm pretty sure.
They are for the turbo, but not for the Carrera GTS.
Gotcha.
The Carrera GTS
that's right. It's like a little pops up a little bit, but they're offset.
They are offset, yes, which is important.
Asymmetry is awesome on cars.
It is. When it's functional.
Yes, correct.
Right, when it's supposed to be functional.
How are you about single mirrors on cars?
I like single mirrors on cars.
I think they're cool.
As long as you've not like removed one.
Oh, right? My dad did that. My dad did that with his Civic Si. He had a 2000 Civic Si. He took the right side mirror. My friends used to call it the flying mirror Civic. Some other honorable mentions. Again, back to my teenage years and Fast and the Furious, when I guess they were the homologation cars for all the crazy Le Mans super sports cars in the 90s. They all had the scoop over the top. So the GT1, the CLK GTR. I think there's a McLaren that has that too. Is it the GTR? Whatever the crazy version of the McLaren F1 is, the racing version has the scoop over all those are sick. And I think Paul Walker's Eclipse had that same, didn't they? They added them on the cars. I think they would add those like scoops on the roof for cars that had
front-engined cars.
Totally. But it was
the RS200s, right?
Oh, awesome.
Any Subaru rally car in the blue and gold livery would have had them. For the front engine cars, I think they were mostly just to create positive pressure inside the cabin, right? So you wouldn't get dust inside and dirt inside.
Unless you're feeding an intercooler or something.
Right.
Or ram air. I mean, like a lot of the muscle cars have, ram air, just get fresh air right into the air filter, right? Shelby's have.
Well, true, but that's over the engine compartment versus if it's a hood scoop on top of the the compartment that you're sitting in. Yeah.
Here's the question: do scoops, like little things on the C-pillar, do those count? Like on BMWs or on Alpha Montreals, are those scoops?
You could also argue that for GT500s.
Totally.
Right. What are those really doing? Yep. Those, I think those are great when they have a little turn signal light, the little like red running light. Fantastic.
Honestly, I like the outlet vents on the back of all the Porsche 911s above the rear window. I've always thought that was cool.
Yes,
that's to get hot air out.
Correct.
Yeah. Gullwings also have sick ones. I think it's two of them back there.
And an asymmetrical hood bulge.
Oh, yes. Very good. When you're slanting the motor over.
Yeah. Got to get that extra space in there.
Totally. Did you figure out your Continental conundrum?
I did.
Okay, I want to see it. What year?
56. It must have been a mid-year.
Oh,
get rid of.
That's for AC?
It's for the air conditioner is in the back.
It's in the trunk.
Or the condenser or the evaporator, whatever it is.
Yep.
Much like 911 would be.
Totally.
It's separate, right? There's one portion up in front and one in the back.
And people do that when they do builds today. They'll hide the condenser under the trunk lid or under the back of the car when you don't have room, when it wasn't a factory thing. That's an awesome one back there.
Yeah, I know. It's weird. This is one of the things where it was Zach would always try and challenge me when I was an auction specialist writing listings, sending me cars that I knew absolutely nothing about.
Yeah, totally.
And this was an early one for me.
That you learned. See, you learned. Sure. VAT teaching you things. One other quick honorable mention for me, just because I was thinking about these cars and ranting to anyone who would listen a couple of weeks ago, talking to one of our power sellers, Anthony Serra, 1600 Veloce. He was mentioning and reminded me of a car that we've only listed one of, and that they don't come up very often. So there was the tax cheater Italian 2-liter deal with Ferrari 308s and 308 GT4s. They're called 208s and 208 GT4s. They somehow de-stroke this. They're still V8s, but they're 2-liter instead of 3-liter, less power. There's also the Italian M3, the E30 that had a S14 that was only 2-liter in it. All for some Italian workaround. But I'd forgotten there was a 328 version of it too, and they put a turbo on it. So it's still a V8, it's 2-liter. They added a turbo, and it's not even called a 328 or a 228. It's called a GTB turbo if it's a coupe, or a GTS turbo if it's a Targa. There's only a couple hundred of them. And Anthony was teasing that there might be a GTB turbo sitting around that had been brought in when it was new. I think he said red with a white interior and red carpets. But they are the only factory, he pointed out to me, they're the only factory turbos other than the 288
I was just
and
going to
the
say, like
F40.
That's like a great budget 288.
Totally. Until, the modern cars, which are all turbocharged. And they have added, if you type in GTB turbo on our site, not only did we list a sick one, Bill Noon, many years ago, it's blue, but it has added NACA ducts down on the quarter panels to feed the intercooler and to give extra thing. And then it also has cutouts in the rear bumper to get heat out of the engine bay, because obviously with the turbo on, it's got a hotter engine bay. I think it's got a top mount intercooler like like an SVO Mustang or any of those things. Anyway, just another cool one. Cool when it's a little bit like your Continental. Cool when there's like an added little thing that you wouldn't even normally notice. You know what I mean? It's an extra little scoop.
Speaking of rare E30 M3s, right? We were talking about the 2-liter version for Italy. We have right now, actually, live on the site, is an E30 M3 convertible.
Oh, very rare. I think we've only had, 4 or 5 of them?
So rare that one of those where, like, when it gets submitted, I'm like,
is it fake?
How do you prove to me this is real?
That you didn't slap flares on a 325 vert?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Where's the receipt for this body kit, sir? But no, it is fully real and it's going nuts. It's going to be closing in 4 days. It's doing really well.
Not many of those around.
Not many of those around.
Are you down for 1 or 2 more?
Let's do it.
All right. I'm going to get to the weirdest one last. Believe it or not, this is not the weirdest one. Favorite promotional vehicle? Okay.
I read this one too.
This one's trickier. And it's also like, you got to wonder if you can, like, how far does this exist? Does it just have to be the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile, or can you get like a lot more broad with it?
One that I think was brought up in that conversation that I did like, because I remember seeing them kind of in my time, was the mini Red Bull cars. I remember seeing those in college.
Is that where they have the can stuck to the top?
In the back of it, jettisoning out the top.
Did they have little Suzuki SUVs that had those too?
I don't recall.
Okay.
But definitely the Mini Cooper.
Yep.
Because I was in college from 03 to 07. Like the Mini was rising, very popular.
Right
very
along
trendy.
with Red Bull, right?
Right along with Red Bull. And Red Bull's in bars. And I went to a Big Ten school where bars is...
You were in bars all the time.
And so there was definitely a Mini Red Bull in Champaign-Urbana pretty much every weekend. And I always remember thinking that was so quirky and weird and kind of cool.
I found the post to mainly be educational and also, to your point, like reminding you of things that you'd forgotten about, because it is kind of obscure. And there's a bunch of really cool things that our community brought up. Oscar Mayer Wienermobile is always what comes. Have you ever seen one of those in person?
I don't think I have, actually.
I've seen some of them. There's like, and there's like,
what are they underneath?
I think there are a bunch of different things, because there's one of the things that is interesting about them. It's a little bit like the Goodyear blimp. It's been a promotional vehicle for so long that there's all these iterations of them, right? Like the newest Goodyear blimps are these like semi-rigid Zeppelin built crazy things, but you can go back to the 20s and there were Goodyear blimps that were very crude early blimps. And I think it's the same thing with the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile. There's so many iterations of them. And we've even sold Wienermobile pedal car. There's like, there's like a whole subculture of Wienermobile, like, like toys and everything. Absolutely. So that's a pretty good one.
That is a great one. I mean, that's probably the most notable one that people can quickly recall, for sure.
I mean, some of the other the Goodyear blimp is, that's a vehicle that counts. One of the other ones that we mentioned was the the Budweiser wagon with all the Clydesdales pulling it. That's like a very, very famous one. The GM Future, I have actually seen one of those before, the kind of big van truck things that they built that are all streamlined. Have you ever seen those? I think they're called Future Liners. Oh, that was the one that a lot of people brought up. The one that I went into had like kind of a door on the side that you would open up, and it has a big single cab up in the front, and they're all streamlined. And as I recall, it had maps or blueprints. It was like a mobile showroom basically for
like
documents. As I recall, they were like design, like future designs. I can't remember. There were different ones that did different things, as I recall. Somebody out there listening knows exactly what they did with them, and I can't remember exactly.
Do you also pause podcasts that you are listening to then give the correct answer?
I don't, but I do. One of my favorite podcasts they call middle-aged dudes who are into the stuff you or I into, history dads. Where like the history dad like has been waiting his whole life for his kid to ask how the Electoral College works or whatever,
Correct.
And you're like, let me tell you. And 2 sentences in, your kid's like, I regret that I asked. I do have history dad moments a lot with podcasts where I'm like, I wish they had me there. I can explain that one a lot better.
They would appreciate this.
Oh, totally. Let me tell them.
John Mulaney has a great joke that's all boomer dads are cramming for a World War II exam that's never going to happen.
My whole life, buddy.
Put me in, coach. Correct.
Nobody cares. Is the reality. Okay, this is the last one, and then we'll let everyone go. What pre-war car would you daily drive today? Now, this one's particularly a challenge for you. And of course, I could rant for 20 minutes about this. And there's some very basic answers, but I want to tee it up to you first. Or I can vamp if you want me to.
I don't know if the vamping is going to help too much. Okay. I will say what's going to help me the most is that for the first time ever, I went to the Pebble Beach Concours in August. I took my dad, and I'm
not sure I got a download from you on that.
No, I don't think it happened. We had a lovely time. Biggest mistake I made was not getting there earlier.
It gets so freaking crowded. It was
insane.
Yeah.
We got in there, I want to say between 9. We got up early. We got up like at 7:30, but like it still took us an hour and a half.
It's kind of a fiasco to get in there. You have to take buses and shuttles.
Correct. We were parked very far. We actually parked, relatively speaking, close. Like when we were getting back to our car, it was insane.
Were you on 17 Mile somewhere?
Yeah, 17 Mile Road. We were in A section, so like the first section, and it goes back to like L, through the alphabet. And so we parked up relatively close in that sense, got on the bus. And then you get to the bus drops you off. You then have to walk through definitely more than a mile of booths and stations and this and that.
Show cars and
show cars. And some company has bought up this area that you now have to walk through.
Look at all these brand new EVs.
Right, yeah. Rivian did have a booth, which I actually did appreciate. They had the new R3 there, so I like seeing that.
Oh, I don't even know what that is, a smaller one?
That's their smallest one. It's not going to come out for several years, but I'm very excited about it.
Look good?
It looks great.
Yeah.
That's the one that the way they previewed it, it looks like a modern Delta Integrale.
Oh, cool.
It's fantastic.
Rivians are my favorite of
for
all
sure.
Yeah.
But with when we eventually got to the lawn, got there around 9:30 or so, immediately ran into Tyler Greenblatt.
Oh, great.
With his dad.
Fantastic.
And I asked him, like, well, this is getting kind of crazy here. Like, we got to sort of walk through for half an hour. And I was like, how long have you been here for? And he said, 5:30 in the morning. Like, oh, okay. Because he lives there. He knows. He's been going every year, I think, with his dad for a very long time. And I realized I should have reached out to Tyler ahead of time and asked him, how should I do this?
Yeah, he was on his way out while you were on your way.
He was literally working his way out. They're like, we're out by 10.
Yeah.
Because when we eventually, we had lunch there around 12:30, 1 o'clock, we're like, this is getting a little hairy. And we weren't willing to stay until the awards were happening. People were already pitching out their blankets for where they're going to sit. And
where they drive them across the,
Correct. And so I was like, we don't have the time or the energy or the equipment to post up here. So if we're going to leave, if we're done looking, we should just go. So when we were leaving like around 1-ish or so, even at 1 o'clock, for every one person leaving, there was still at least 3 people entering.
Wow.
That late in the day. Like it was massive. Now, granted, there was a lot of hype around some of the special displays they had. They had the wedge cars.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So it's all 70s sort of era prototype.
The C111 cars. Mercedes, that kind of stuff.
Correct. And
what is it? Stratos Zero? What's the real
the
wedge?
HF Zero was there. That's the one where the glass panel opens up and then you.
It is a Stratos underneath, isn't it?
Oh, I don't know if it is.
Maybe it's
definitely the motor was definitely not what was in the back then. It was in some little dinky engine in there. So that was all super cool. They had all of the Land Rovers, the Queen's Land Rovers.
Oh, I heard about that.
From her first to the last one. They're all modified on the back end so that she can stand and hold on if she wants to wave, but there's also benches for her. And they're all identical colors with her pinstripe, whatever her color was. So that was kind of cool to see them. I realized those are on sort of quasi-tour through the United States right now.
They also were driving them around Goodwood, I think.
Oh,
so
really?
it's been some kind of an ongoing
probably recommissioned
tour.
them, right?
Yeah.
And then taking them around the world, maybe. I believe they're on the East Coast at some event last weekend or so. But in that process, got to see a few beautiful cars from that era. I don't really know if I've got a specific one that I feel strongly about in any way. I definitely would have more interest in the Duesenbergs, just because for purely a layman of pre-war cars, those by far looked to be the most that seemed like there's a reason why they call them, it's a doozy, right? Like it was craftsmanship to the nth degree. It looked like a cozy, warm living room that you could go sit in, whether the car was moving or not. You just sort of wanted to be in that space.
Totally.
And that was something that you could really appreciate in person that I had never really seen at the same echelon, the same level. It's interesting to see.
You'd also have the fastest car on the road, which is interesting.
Correct.
You'd be in this amazingly crafted thing that's so comfortable and also have the fastest car.
And other than the Mercedes,
which doesn't exist anymore, it's like not even a thing that you can have anymore. You can't have like the highest quality, most comfortable, most luxurious car that's also the fastest. Like that's like a dead thing.
It's a weird. I mean, you could argue
I guess
that
kind
Bugatti,
of, kind of
that sort of stuff, sort of. But a lot of that pricing is sort of fake.
Yep.
It just doesn't really relate to actually what the cost is to produce the car.
Mm-hmm.
Like Duesenberg wasn't also a giant conglomeration that was making all these other cars that they could actually make profit off of. So it's weird to sort of compare the two. But even the Mercedes didn't look nearly as tailor-made as the Duesenbergs did. And then when you go away from Mercedes and away from the Americans, they start to look kind of Spartan of that time. The Duesenbergs were clearly up and away. What's yours? What's the one that gets you?
Honestly, that's such a good answer. That's probably what I should. I mean, I own 2 pre-war Accords, which are very modern for what they are, but they're so crappy. That was actually
yours specifically, or in general?
Mine are crappier than your average Accord. Actually, that's not true, but they were very modern for what they are. And I think Accord won this question of the week, by the way. And like they are unibody and front wheel drive, and there's a supercharged model, and they're a 4-speed, and they have hydraulic brakes. They were very advanced for a pre-war car, and they drive comfortably like a modern car, especially if you have a sedan version. Both of mine are sedans. And so that makes a lot of sense, but they're so crappy. They'd be broken. They were broken all the time when they were new, and they're broken all the time now when they're old cars. So honestly, I would drive a Ford. I mean, probably like a Model A would be fine, but a 32 through 34 Ford coupe, like the kind of thing I'd like to have as a hot rod, but just as a stock car. Or I think I showed you this, the car that's top of my mind now is that 39 Ford Deluxe coupe that Matt Crandall, that 911R just sold, I think yesterday.
Oh, did it sell?
Beautiful green and basically stock. And that's like a totally, you could actually drive that. And that car beautifully restored and has a 12-volt conversion. Other than that, it's basically still single carb, 21 stud flathead with the beautiful curved shifter for the 3-speed. I think if you put a 2-speed rear end on that car, you could drive that. You could actually drive that car around every day with the 12-volt conversion right now. It
seems to me like the Cord of that time, and I've written a few Cord listings in my day, not as much as recently, that a lot of the engineering design was around making the driving experience very easy and easy on the driver.
Yeah.
Right. As opposed to something that would require skill.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of those cars, we've talked about Rolls's and Doozies and Mercedes, like they came with a driver/mechanic who would essentially operate the vehicle for you and maintain all that. And Cords, whenever I've watched a driving video for a Cord, it doesn't look harrowing.
Yeah.
Right? It looks very easy.
They have independent front suspension, which like seems crazy to say that that's a feature, but most American cars, most cars, they had a solid beam front end with like a transverse leaf spring, right? So the fact that it's front wheel drive, it has trailing arm front suspension. It still has a transverse leaf, but it's independent. It's got that a 4-speed. A lot of cars were 3-speed unsynchro, so you couldn't go very fast. Cord's got a 4-speed, so you can cruise at 75 miles an hour. They went 100 miles an hour, right? They were fast cars for the day. So those make a lot of sense. It's just the unreliability piece. The thing about that Ford is just dirt simple, and it'll start every day.
Can I give one more shout out to a pre-war car?
Absolutely.
I just thought
you can never get enough pre-war shout outs for me.
Do you know what a Kleiber is?
Gosh, you might have stumped me on that. Okay.
It is, I believe, the only auto manufacturer that has been ever based in San Francisco.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
They were in south of Market where Mercedes used to be. Mercedes recently left San Francisco and a Porsche dealership went in there. And what they were notable, they mostly made trucks.
They were built here?
Built here in San Francisco. And what they were notable for was having 4-wheel brakes.
Oh, so this is like pre-World War I? Is this brass era?
Starting then. They made it all the way through to, I believe, the early 40s.
Okay.
But that was just like you were saying.
Are they full-sized or pickup
full
trucks?
Size?
Okay.
I think people
flatbeds
did bodies on them as well, but they're mostly were trucks. That's what they're known for. When you're saying independent front suspension seems sort of taken for granted now. 4-wheel, not just disc brakes. I'm talking 4-wheel brakes.
Correct.
And the reason why was because of the hills in San Francisco.
Had to be able to stop.
You needed something that could actually take the heat.
They were probably still cable operated though. So
very possibly, which is why you need 4 of them.
Totally.
Right? Each one of them was so weak and inefficient.
That's right.
And so they were known for that. And Jay Leno has an operating one.
Oh, of course he does.
I discovered it years ago watching his feed on YouTube, and he mentioned the Kleiber truck and made out of San Francisco and why it was sort of unique.
I love that.
I love that.
He also has a Doble steam car, which is the last steam. It was when they finally really refined steam power, built in the late 20s, maybe up to about 1930. And they have a bunch of advancements for a technology that was essentially dead, but they work quite a bit more seamlessly than a Stanley steamer of 30 years earlier. He likes that kind of technology, transitional or a kind of dead end technology where it got perfected. There's a lot of things like that where, one last true believer is still developing, some kind of technology that's about to go under.
Well, often it's because there's one thing about it that's still the best at it.
And some of those things come back, right?
Sure.
Dr. Porsche's first car was an electric car with, I think, 4 independent motors, which is like now back in supercars, right? A motor at each wheel. Yeah. Good stuff. All right. Sorry to throw that one at you at the end.
I got to bring out my Kleiber knowledge.
No, that was good. That was, talk about history, Dad. It's perfect. Any parting shots, Beck? Anything for the end here?
I'm looking forward to the holidays. I honestly am. It's weird. It's a weird feeling to
We were talking about that earlier. When you become a middle-aged dude, you get excited about it.
You get excited for it. I saw my first Christmas tree on Tuesday, like in a house, and it didn't actually make me angry.
I'm excited for the smell of the Christmas tree in the house, all of it. Oh, man. We started with children and family affairs, and we're closing out with it.
Which means it's time for a second beer.
Cheers again, man.
Cheers.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody for listening. We appreciate, as always, any feedback you want to send our way to podcast@bringatrailer.com. Always happy to hear from folks. And thanks for listening. We will catch you next time.